The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Remember this, when you're the greatest fighter in the world today, they got a name for you. They don't call you a great fighter, they call you Chael Sonnen. Beat me, if you can.
And after tonight, none of you in this ring will ever again!
You're talking to the Rolex wearing, diamond ring wearing, kid stealing, woo, wheeling dealing, limousine riding, jet flying, son of a gun, and I'm having a hard time holding these alligators down. Woo!
I'm gonna drink a Coors Light. That's a Coors Light because Bud Light won't pay me nothing.
And I have in my cold beer. You have your cold beer? If not, you are fucking jabroni.
Wash it down with 1 beer, 2 beers, 3 beers, a shot of whiskey.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Coming up on the Filthy FRB Show, we're going to talk about Bryan's time away at the NCAA Wrestling Championships this past weekend, as long as what went on at UFC Fight Night 62 down in Rio de Janeiro. Stay tuned, because we got a show coming at you now.
Look out! Damn! Triple just took out the referee! What is he doing? What's this about? What's it for? What the hell is the meaning of this?
You know, Tom, this weekend is the greatest martial arts event of the year, at least in my estimation, and it's WrestleMania 31. I'm excited. I'm going out to Santa Clara. I know you'll be there. What do you think so far, the build?
Well, I wasn't too excited, to be honest, up until yesterday when Brock Lesnar made his appearance on SportsCenter and made WrestleMania about 3,000 times more intriguing, just by simply stating that his UFC and MMA career is over. He's now re-signed with the WWE, and it opens up about, a million possibilities as compared to just Roman Reigns walking out as a champion on Sunday night. Now Brock could win, Reigns could win, Rollins could cash in, we could see a Brock face turn, a Heyman turn, maybe he goes with Reigns. There's so many options now coming out of yesterday's announcement on SportsCenter.
Sure, and before we get into the details of some of the things that could happen, just to talk a little bit about the decision that Brock made to re-sign with WWE. I was hopeful that he'd come back to the UFC just because I like seeing him fight. It's always exciting when it's a Brock Lesnar fight. Even when he loses, I don't think the guy's ever been in a boring fight. But I always thought that this made the most sense for him. There was some talk about concussions, which was backed up by guys that had been in the room with him, and they weren't allowed to punch him in the head during sparring, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of sparring. So I think there was some health concerns, and then I think there was concerns that maybe if he got back in there and Frank Mir knocked him out, that it would somehow hurt his pro wrestling gimmick. What are your thoughts about, why ultimately he made the decision to re-sign with WWE?
I think there's a few factors. Obviously, age, I think, is the biggest one. Brock's, 38 years old? If he was 28 years old, I think it'd be a different story. Also, he's been out of the game for a few years, and when you're out of that competition mindset, it's a lot tougher to get back into it. I'm kind of going through the same thing right now, and Brock's had a longer layoff than I have. And I just know from my own personal experience, once you're not used to pushing like you're in camp all the time, when it's time to get back into that, it's very tough and it's taxing on your body and even more so mentally, especially if at age 38 you're not able to do the things that you were able to 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, I was listening to Dave Meltzer's radio show with Bryan Alvarez, and he mentioned that Lesnar has been in the gym, and so this was a decision that kind of went down to the wire between WWE and returning to the UFC. So he was in the gym, and Brock kind of made it sound like he got in the gym, and the daily grind of it. It sounded a lot better in theory than in practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, personally, taking punches to the face isn't great. It's not a lot of fun, and especially for the money that Brock's making. They haven't announced the figures, I don't believe, but I think he made what, $5 million? Was that his last deal?
That was the rumor for the contract. Yeah.
Yeah, 1 year, $5 million, 20 dates. So you can't really beat that schedule. So despite whatever the UFC threw at him, and Brock saying that they doubled their offer at the last minute when he contacted them to let him know that he was re-signing with the WWE. That's a lot of money floating around there for Brock, and to only have to work 20 days a year to make $5 million, that's pretty damn good.
Yeah, and I don't know if you caught the interview. Brock was talking to Michelle Beadle on ESPN. He made mention of something to the effect, "It's more than about me," and he didn't get into it, but I assume he meant his wife Rena, aka Sable, and then he's got a daughter from a previous relationship, and then 2 sons. So I think that played a big role into it, and I assume there's some health issues from his initial run in WWE, and then his MMA career. So I think family certainly played a role in it. And he also mentioned that he promised us when he retired. I think in the ring he said he promised his family that he was going to beat Overeem and then beat Dos Santos and then walk. Do you recall that?
No, not really. But
yeah, I thought that's what he said, that he was, even if he beat Overeem, he was only going to fight one more time, get the title back, and then quit.
You're talking about before. I thought you were talking about after the Overeem fight, after he got liver kicked.
Yeah, I think the plan was, it was to do 2 fights, Overeem and then Dos Santos. No, maybe it was Overeem, Dos Santos, and then Kane again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds about right. And obviously, the public would pay to see any of those fights, even though 2 of them would be rematches, and they were not competitive fights the first time they happened. But Lesnar's such a big star; he's larger than the sport of the UFC. Obviously, he's larger than the WWE even. He's a superstar in his own right, and he's going to draw in viewers regardless if he's taking an ass kicking or handing one out.
And that's what I thought. That's why I was like, if he comes back and gets beat up, I mean, who cares? He came back in 2012, 4 months after getting killed by Overeem, and really, just looking about as bad as you can look in a fight. And he came back, and from day one, he was the most over guy in the entire company.
Mm.
So, I think, does it even matter if he came back and he got knocked out by Frank Mir in August or September? If he would have showed up at the Royal Rumble, do you think he would have been any less over?
I mean, that's a tough one. Obviously, I mean, they've made some mistakes with the way that they've booked Brock since he's been back, and it doesn't seem that it's hurt him at all. I mean, if you remember, he's lost to Triple H. He lost his first match to Cena right off the bat, and it didn't really seem to affect his momentum very much. So, I think it's a situation where Vince probably understands it. I'm sure the front office people in the WWE know that Lesnar is like a cash cow, and wherever he goes right now, a lot of people are going to follow, and they're going to watch it. So whether it was the UFC or WWE or Glory or Bellator or whatever it is, somebody had to get a hold of him and start taking advantage of it. And fortunately for the WWE and for the fans of pro wrestling, they're the ones that snagged him.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the way Brock was booked when he first came back. He had that match with John Cena at Extreme Rules, and he jobbed him. He jobbed out to Cena. And I think just prior to that, Cena had lost to Lord Tensai, who we were talking about a little bit off the air. And I think they put Cena over Lesnar so Cena could get his heat back after jobbing to this beast known as Lord Tensai. Do you remember that?
Yeah, the Japanese representative, Lord Tensai, who was that didn't pan out well, did it?
Yeah, what do you think the issue was? Do you think he should have just came back as Prince Albert? Or, I mean, what was it thinking with that?
Yeah, well, I don't think it was up to him. I mean, let's be honest. I told you the deal. Previously, I was at a WrestleMania. I ran into a female who I knew from somebody else who was involved with somebody who came up with the Lord Tensai character. And, like you said, off the record, maybe that's something you should keep to yourself. I don't know if that's the big gimmick I'd be pumping out there, telling people to watch and take advantage of, because that was before Tensai even debuted. I was told about that, and I knew who it was, and I knew it wasn't going to work out.
Yeah, I mean that's funny. I mean to actually admit to coming up with the Lord Tensai gimmick. I mean, who I wouldn't tell anybody.
Yeah, stop. Well, hey, when you got things like the Gobbledygooker, you got the Shockmaster, you got Katie Vick, you got all these things around there floating around. Lord Tensai is kind of at the bottom of the ridiculousness.
But you think your next fight, if you walked out for the weigh-in as Lord Tensai, do you think anybody would get it? Or it's just not high profile enough?
I mean, honestly, I hope they don't get it. I mean, we're talking about a pretty obscure reference that, really didn't even make a mark in the WWE. I mean, he was Sweet Tea or something within a year. So that was like a blip on the radar of pro wrestling, and really a stain on it, if I can be honest.
Yeah. And so now with Lesnar back, I see it playing out that he will go over Roman Reigns on Sunday. And at that point, he'll disappear. He'll come back at SummerSlam. But in the meanwhile, John Cena will go over Rusev, and that'll elevate the U.S. title. Daniel Bryan will win the IC title. That'll elevate that belt. All in theory. I don't know if it'll work. So you could have Cena headlining one of the house show circuits and have Daniel Bryan headlining the other house show circuit. Do you see that playing out, or do you have any other scenarios that you see likely?
No, I agree with you. I don't know that Lesnar will retain the title. I definitely feel like, to me, this kind of feels like Survivor Series, what was it, like 98 or 99 when The Rock became the corporate champion? I think, honestly, that's the way to go with Reigns. The fans are not going to cheer him on Sunday. I know for damn sure, Brian, I'm not going to be cheering him. I'm going to be in section 120 looking down on Roman Reigns and booing him feverishly. All right? I'm going to be chanting for Brock Lesnar more than I've ever cheered for anybody in my entire life. And I'm assuming that the 70,000 people that are in the Levi Stadium are going to be doing the same thing. And now whether that means Brock goes over and sends everybody home happy, I don't know that that's the right call. I think if you don't give Reigns the title, it's kind of be a situation with like with Alberto Del Rio a couple years ago, where he was, there was a time to put the title on him. Unfortunately, they didn't do it because I believe that's when Edge was injured and hanging his boots up, soon thereafter. So Edge went over with the title. But yeah, I think Reigns will walk out the champion, and honestly, I think there's going to be some sort of Heyman swerve in there. There's been a few signs in his promos that pointed to it. Especially this past Monday, you could see there was a little bit of tension between Heyman and Lesnar, at least focused on the things that Heyman was saying when he brought up the family. He brought up Reigns, basically doing home invasion, and that being the only way to beat him. And, the look on Brock's face was kind of taken aback. And, I don't know that if they don't pull the trigger with Reigns now, there may not be another time to do it, because the fans aren't going to enjoy it either way, And I just think he's better off as a heel.
Yeah, and I think it would be a great message that, because Vince McMahon obviously picked Roman Reigns. He's the guy that he wants to elevate. I think it'd be a great message to send that the guys on the internet are not going to influence the way I do business. They're not going to dictate what I know. I mean, Vince McMahon knows more about professional wrestling than probably anybody knows about any subject, if that makes sense. So if I'm Vince, I'm saying no. He's the guy I picked. I'm trusting my judgment, and if you don't like it, of course you're going to say you're going to cancel the network, you're going to do all this, but you'll be back.
Yeah, we saw that. I mean, that's definitely true, because the day after the Royal Rumble, where there was a huge public outcry against Roman Reigns and for Daniel Bryan, and there's hashtag cancel the network and all these other things. Then the next day is their biggest subscriber number on the network, So I'm sure Vince didn't feel too bad about putting Roman Reigns over in that Royal Rumble main event. But it could be the same case with WrestleMania coming up. Maybe Reigns going over boosts the intrigue a little bit. People don't know what's going on. It's a new face on top. Maybe it'll boost numbers. I don't know. I just don't see him being the long-term solution. And to be quite honest, I mean, what's wrong with Lesnar? What's wrong with having him at the top? I know he's a little bit long in the tooth age-wise, but I mean, he's the hottest thing going right now. So why kill off his momentum at all? You got to keep him strong. You got to keep him at the top. Whether he retains or not, I don't know. But if he loses, I mean, there's got to be a screw job in there somewhere.
Yeah, I really like the idea of Paul Heyman turning on Lesnar. Just like Heyman did, 10 or 12 years ago, turned on Lesnar. Have Reigns win the belt, have Heyman, get him over with his great promos, and then Lesnar will come back at SummerSlam and, maybe go over at that point. But, Brock's already over as a babyface. I mean, Heyman turning on him could just make him maybe the biggest babyface in that company since maybe a prime Rock or Stone Cold.
Yeah, I mean, people want to cheer Lesnar. That's for sure. Did you see the Rock interview the other day where they asked him what his plans were for Sunday, and he kind of gave a non-committal answer that made it sound like he'll be at WrestleMania?
Yeah, I saw that, and he's, from what I'm told, or somebody on Twitter told me, he's hosting Saturday Night Live the night before.
Yep.
And so I mean, he is a private jet, so if he interferes, do you see him being the heel, interfering on his cousin? That's his cousin, Roman Reigns? Yeah,
they're not actually blood related. So they're about as much cousins as you and I are. or Greg Jackson and Quentin Jackson.
Right, or Michael Jackson.
I believe they're also cousins. Yeah. That's a good question. If you remember back years and years ago, The Rock came back after Hollywood and was a heel again. And it doesn't take much for The Rock or Dwayne Johnson to get people to cheer him or people to boo him. He's good at making the crowd do either one. And I could see him coming back in a capacity as a heel. He didn't get cheered at Royal Rumble. That's for damn sure. And he didn't do anything heelish there. I mean, he beat up Kane in the Big Show, which, I mean, I think everybody was hoping for that. So, and he still got booed.
Yeah, I guess that was because of Roman Reigns, just by extension.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's there's so many things that could happen in this main event with Lesnar and Reigns, but we're kind of missing, some of the bigger stories on WrestleMania, Bryan, like the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. What's going to happen there?
Well, who's in it?
I'll run down the participants. The announced participants are The Miz, Axelmania, Curtis Axel, Ryback, Fandango, Adam Rose, Zack Ryder, Jack Swagger, Titus O'Neil, Darren Young, Big Show, Kane, Eric Rowan, Damian Mizdow, Sin Cara, Goldust, Heath Slater, Mark Henry, Connor, Victor, and the winner of the NXT WrestleMania Access Tournament, who I am hoping will be Finn Balor, and I'm hoping he wins that Battle Royal, but I'm not going to hold my breath.
I'm going to be marking out for Axelmania. I think that's a great gimmick. He had that little angle with Hulk Hogan, and I just thought it was really funny.
Yeah, that's easily the most entertaining that he's been since he's debuted on any WWE television. Yeah, I think it's. I mean, I would love to see him win the Battle Royal, to be honest. It's one of those situations where you see a guy kind of get stuck with a shit gimmick like the one-man band, right? Heath Slater. And he just runs with it. Or Damian Mizdow, right? They take this gimmick and they just run with it, and it gets better with time. And I kind of feel like that's the way the Axelmania is. At first it was like, oh my God, they're going to let this guy get some TV time and complain about getting knocked out of the Rumble. But, he took what they gave him and he made it into something. And he's about 3,000 times more, important on TV compared to what he was a few months ago.
Now, in another match that's not designed just to get everybody on the roster on the broadcast, you got Sting.
Well, who's gonna win the Rumble? Who's gonna win the Battle Royal?
WrestleMania.
That's your prediction? Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, guys, we'll talk about who we think's gonna win. But if you have time, go to countermove.com and we'll be running a WrestleMania pool on there, so you can match up your picks against ours and see how you do.
Yeah, we'll have more details on the counter move. I mean, that's something that literally just materialized, before we started recording this. So follow our Twitters at Filthy Tom Lawler, at Front Row Bryan, and we'll have more details on how you can participate. I haven't really played any fantasy games, any fantasy wrestling, fantasy football, or anything really other than straight bets. But, it seems to be – I had somebody in Vegas describe it to me as the new online poker. And it's because it's illegal, it's kind of a loophole, and people are playing it and making a bunch of money.
Yeah, well, hey, if we can start scoring trips with Calvin Ayers down to Costa Rica to watch, girls fight each other on the beach due to counter move, I'm all for it.
I like it. So Sting and Triple H. So Sting, makes his long. I've been watching wrestling. I guess now about like 22 years, and this is the first time Sting will ever compete inside the squared circle of WWE. I mean, that's amazing that one guy was out of the WWE. Well, not part of WWE, but yet still this legendary figure.
Yeah, and he really is, and he looks great. I think the limited times they've used him on TV. I thought the angle with him and Triple H to begin Raw this past week was awesome. You see Sting pull the bat out and start winging it around. I thought that was set up perfectly. It'll be interesting to see how much time that match gets and how much work they actually do. Both guys are good with getting a crowd reaction. Both guys, will be fine with the psychology of the match. Obviously, Triple H is probably the better worker of the two throughout history, I would almost 100% say. And Sting is, more than carryable. So I'm looking forward to a really good match, and I like the build-up so far. I think that match and the Rusev-John Cena match are the two matches I'm kind of most excited for. The Lesnar-Reigns match is very intriguing, especially after Lesnar re-signed, but they've done a great job, I think, with the Rusev-Cena build and the Sting-Triple H build.
Now, are you only putting Sting over because of your history with him, of berating him at a pay-per-view in Boston?
Yeah, he looks good for his age, I'll tell you that much.
Now, how long ago was that? Like 5 or 6 years ago?
Nah, this is like 2 years ago.
2 years ago, wow. You better hope you don't run into him out there.
I hope I do run it. I'd like to tell him how much that impacted me. Him basically running me down as I was running him down left quite an impression on me.
I heard that night was a lot worse than you let on.
Yeah. I know what you're speaking of. Basically, for those of you that don't know, I set Bryan up with a drinking buddy a few weeks ago in Boston, a good friend of mine, and I'm assuming he told him the full story of how the next morning, basically, he woke up and it was covered in like a gigantic octopus-sized vomit in his bed. So.
And you refused to eat that day, so you just drank for 18 hours, and
yeah, there was a lot of debauchery going on there. There was, if I can remember most of it, myself and my buddy met up. Well, we met these girls. And now remember this, Bryan. This is even better.
Right.
The day before, I had broken up with my girlfriend of 5 years.
Oh.
Okay, that was the day before. So then, my friend and I are in Boston. We decide, hey, it's 11 a.m. Let's start drinking. And let's not eat all day. So we went down. We ended up meeting some girls. One of them looked like Wesley Snipes from Demolition Man. So we were hanging out with her and her friend who looked like the main character from Bug's Life, who was actually very attractive. We hung out with them for a while, drank, didn't eat anything, went to another bar, ran into a security guard who looked just like Linda from Double Dragon, who chastised us and told us we were immature, which she was absolutely correct. And after that, we left the bar since we were berated by the security guard and made our way down to what is that? It's not Angus Arena, Agus Arena, or whatever the Boston University one is. And it's there that you can find me on the TNA pay-per-view in the background for all 3 hours, basically standing up for 3 hours in the front row.
Did security ever come over to you and be like, hey, you guys need to like settle down a little bit?
No, it was mostly us hugging each other for no reason and laughing. And every once in a while people would cheer out my name from the stands, or I'm assuming it was one person, so that made me feel good.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Anyways, let's move on from Sting. Let's talk about the Rusev-Cena match.
Yeah, so what do you think should happen with this? I see some people saying Rusev should go over, bring that unbeaten streak all the way to WrestleMania next year. I'm kind of in the boat. Hey, keep pushing Rusev's undefeated gimmick.
I don't know. I like the idea of John Cena being the U.S. champion, and that's his thing from now on. I think this is perfect. I mean, Rusev is largely undefeated. I mean, he's lost by count out and other nefarious ways, but for the most part, he's been heavily protected. And I don't think John Cena beating him is really going to hurt his character that much. The U.S. Championship, until it was on Rusev, was kind of like kind of brought the guys down. Rusev has done a good enough job of keeping it at least respectable. And I think giving John Cena that belt, letting him headline shows as the U.S. champion, as a representative of the U.S., is the best angle that they have going.
Do you think they should let him walk out to Hogan's music?
No. But, up until that Hogan appearance on Raw, it was a possibility that he comes out and helps John Cena, or, maybe just kind of mitigates Lana at ringside. But, after seeing Cena get the crap beat out of him this past week on Raw, I'm hoping John Cena goes it alone because, well, he's got to go alone. He's got no friends. The guy hasn't had friends for years, right? He gets beat up. All these guys, Dolph Ziggler, Eric Rowan, those guys show up once or twice and help him out, and then they're nowhere to be found when he's getting put in the accolade on top of the announcer's table. The poor guy.
Yeah. Well, and we haven't seen Lana in a while. She's been filming a movie, or what type of movie?
I don't know about that, but I can tell you what kind of movie I hope it is.
Yeah, we can only hope, right?
Yeah. So you think Rusev's going to go over?
No. I think I would like it, just to extend that streak and maybe build up to some huge match, maybe versus Undertaker next year or somebody like that. But I think Cena goes over because they need a belt on him for him to carry one of the house show touring shows.
Yeah, I agree. I think the same thing will happen with – I think this will be the time that the internet marks, the smart marks, all the people in the crowds, all the European fans are going to get what they want. I think Daniel Bryan will walk out as the IC champ too. As much as I'd rather see Dean Ambrose win that belt, obviously I'm a Daniel Bryan fan. The guy's phenomenal as well. So I think you're going to see a similar situation there with Bryan and Cena. Personally, I'd like to see him, unify the titles, kind of like and elevate it, kind of like how New Japan has. But if you also look at, New Japan's done a good job of elevating that Never title that Ishii has. So, you can have 3 strong singles titles, and hopefully that's the direction WWE's moving in. I don't, maybe that's just optimism, but hopefully that's what happens.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of talk about it. And, another match is The Undertaker versus Bray Wyatt, which The Undertaker hasn't been part of the build at all. Just totally taking a cue from the Nogueira brothers, totally absent. But Bray Wyatt's been talking a lot. And I think Bray Wyatt comes up with or the creative team comes up with just some amazing stuff where you're like, where did he come up with that? Does that even make any sense? And it makes you think a little bit. What's your take on this? Who goes over? Is Undertaker done after this? I saw some pictures of him. He's looking pretty good.
Really? Yeah, to be honest, this will probably be my bathroom break match.
Really?
The build hasn't done much for me. After seeing Undertaker last year, he was broken down. He was a shell of his former self. He's already lost the streak, and that was the big drawing power to me. that he still had because he's clearly diminished. You know, Bray Wyatt hasn't set the world on fire in his matches, and he doesn't have Undertaker to work with in his strongest suit, which is his promos at this point. So this one, I mean, it hasn't done anything for me. I think Undertaker's going to go over simply because he lost last year, and next year WrestleMania is in Texas. If they try to break this big attendance record, they're going to need guys like The Undertaker on that card. And I think if you have him lose 2 times in a row, I mean, he's definitely not coming back next year. It's also possible that maybe they put him in the Hall of Fame next year, and that's where he draws people in and loses this year. But, you know, I kind of see him going over.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe next year in Dallas they do that much talked about match, Undertaker versus Sting, if Sting's up for another go-round.
Yeah, well, that seemed like it was the plan when they initially signed Singh, but they didn't move in that direction. That seemed like it was the no-brainer, right? Like, we're going to take the guy who was considered the franchise of WCW. We'll take the guy who was the one constant in the WWE throughout the years since the early 90s, right? I mean, this guy has been at the top since then, and we'll have those two battle. They both kind of have that supernatural vibe a little bit, but you know, Undertaker versus Sting isn't going to light the world on fire as far as match quality goes. You know, I think we'd be looking at, you know, a 2-star match there with two guys who are past their prime. And personally, I mean, I'd like to see Wyatt win and the Undertaker just retire because I think it's time. But I don't think we're going to see it.
And you know, another match that has a lot of potential to be great, you know, work rate wise. I don't know how much time it'll get. Is Randy Orton versus Seth Rollins, who has the Money in the Bank briefcase. What do you see coming out of that match?
Ooh, I don't know. That's a tough one to call. I think that Orton goes over. But I think if you beat Rollins there, you've got to keep him strong. Either, you know, have him try to cash in or something later in the night, have him cash in and win, have him cash in, you know, the next day on Raw. I don't know. They are pushing Seth Rollins. He is essentially the top heel besides Roman Reigns at this point. But so you have to keep him strong. You don't want him getting beat by Randy Orton and looking bad. So I could see him winning the match. But I think the way it's been set up, besides that, you know, Randy Orton beat the shit out of him a few weeks ago. I think it's been set up to where you think Orton's going to win, but I think Rollins will pull it out. I think they just have to keep him strong.
Yeah, I agree. Rollins has to go over, and I can't see them having him cash in Money in the Bank at WrestleMania. It's never happened to the best of my knowledge, right?
No. But I mean, this is it's a different world, you know. It's all based on this network. It's not about getting buys necessarily for the next pay-per-view. It's about keeping these subscribers going, and you know, it changes things. You know,
yeah, you bring that up, Tom. That's interesting because I saw somebody write on Twitter. It's like, well, is this even being shown anywhere on pay-per-view? I mean, I don't think In Demand showing it, or I mean, I haven't seen any ads. I'm in a Time Warner area.
Yeah, and I have DirecTV, so I'm sure they're carrying it. I mean, there's no doubt because there are still people like us poor people who have DirecTV out in the sticks here, who, you know, maybe don't have the network, or, you know, that's not the case with where I am. I just live in the desert, but yeah, I think most of the viewership is just coming from the network. I think whatever pay-per-view buys they get domestically, they're happy with. But they'd rather push those people to their subscriber number.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see when they release the pay-per-view buys. Last year, they got 400,000 buys in North America, traditional pay-per-view, and then, of course, the network subscriptions. And I was shocked by that 400,000 figure. I think maybe people are just not comfortable with the technology yet, and you know, they didn't want to risk any buffering or the feed going down, or I mean, I watched it last year on the network, and you know, maybe every once in a while there was a little hiccup, like it would switch from HD to standard definition for a second or two, but man, it was pretty damn good.
Yeah, sure. You know, one of the things too, if you think about it, right? Like if you're a kid, say you're 10 years old, you probably don't have your own finances. You don't have a bank account that you're doing an auto draft into the WWE network for, right? Yeah. So it's your parents who are in charge of that. Now, there's a generation gap there, and I think a lot of the people who are reluctant to jump into this like set top box technology or streaming stuff onto the TV, I think are those people who are a little bit older. So maybe they don't even understand, how the entire system works as far as getting the network to work on the TV and vice versa through the different things. And maybe that's why you still end up with these 400,000 pay-per-view buys. Or people just don't like their credit card information being on the internet. You still hear that from a lot of people due to security breaches and whatnot. Obviously my info is like all over the place because I buy everything on the internet, as do a lot of people. But there's still people who are reluctant.
Yeah, Fight Pass, right? UFC's over-the-top service, I think that was breached. Maybe about 40,000, 50,000 credit cards. And that was maybe a couple months ago. So, it's definitely a concern. And like you said, there's a slow migration, or I don't know, maybe slow is the wrong characteristic way to characterize it. But there is a migration towards these streaming services that, I didn't stream anything until maybe a little over a year ago. So I got to believe, people that are older than me would be even slower to adapt to the new technology.
Yeah. I'm not one of those people, so I can't identify with you there, Brian. But hey, let's run through these last two matches, sure, and then we can move on a little bit. These are two important matches, too, by the way. AJ Lee and Paige versus the Bellas in what would be the traditional bathroom break match. And then we also have the tag title match, Fatal 4-Way, on the preview show.
Now, about this Divas match, I want to know what
are your thoughts, Brian?
How come one of these Divas won't blade? What, are they too pretty to do that?
I could see Paige blade. That'd be a good visual, I would think.
Yeah, but with her skin tone, that scar would really stand out. I think the Bellas could get away with it.
Yeah, they're quite a bit darker. I'm sure there's a lot of people that wouldn't mind seeing AJ Lee blade either, but we'll see. I doubt it's going to happen. I don't really care. Depending on where this match is placed in the show, that'll be the other bathroom break match, or beer stand match. Maybe I'll meet you at the concession stand during this one. So
I gotta think it'll be right before the go home.
That seems they've done it in the past, but to be honest, if you look like the Battle Royal, that's kind of a throwaway match too. I don't think there's gonna be too much heat in that. So that I'll be interested to see where that gets placed on the show.
And then what's the other one? We got the
Fatal 4-Way tag title match with Tyson Kidd and Cesaro, the Los Matadores, the New Day, and the Usos.
Oh, I think Los Matadores has that on lockdown, man, because of El Torito. It's an interspecies match. I think they're promoting it as, because El Torito is apparently not a human being.
El Torito's not technically in the match. He'll be at ringside. Well, they have been promoting interspecies matches with El Torito against Natalya on SmackDown and Raw and other things. So
now, who is El Torito? What's his shoot like? Is he just some Mexican guy, that little guy?
Fucking El Torito, man. He's a Mexican mini. I can find out more. Mascarita Dorada, one of the greatest mini luchadors in the history of wrestling.
But how old is he?
He is 33 years old. For those of you that don't watch Lucha Libre, the minis are basically patterned after, bigger stars, throughout wrestling. So, he started as a mini of Mascara Sagrada. He was the AAA mascot tag team title holder with Mascara Sagrada. So there you go. But now he's in the WWE as El Torito, and he's about the same size as Sin Cara, about 10 times more exciting.
That reminds me of something that happened last week with Perro Aguayo Jr. He died in a match with Rey Mysterio that was in it. What was the cause of death? Like he took a missile drop kick and then just fell he couldn't break his fall and just fell right on his throat.
Nah, I mean, I've watched the video multiple times and I've read countless accounts of what went on and the reports from the doctors and the commission. And, the consensus seems to be that just a freak accident. At some point, he suffered basically like it was described as kind of like whiplash. At least that's how Dave Meltzer described it. He suffered whiplash to his neck. At first, they thought maybe it was when Manic from TNA, who was also in the match, hit the ropes as Paraguay was also on him. But as I watch it, it doesn't look to be the case. It looks like it just looks bizarre. There's nothing to see really. I've watched it multiple times and I just can't wrap my head around it. And the entire time as I'm watching Raw on Monday, unfortunately, I'm watching these guys hit the ropes and I'm trying to like imagine like, at any moment based on what I just saw, there could be another accident because there was nothing that, it wasn't like a botched spot. I mean, there was nothing that looked like it went wrong, to the naked eye. So basically, I think he just suffered, spinal issues. Perhaps he was knocked out from that, and then it sounds like his organs and everything else, his heart started going into cardiac arrest and started shutting down from there. So,
well, I'm reading here. It looks like he had spinal damage, cervical spinal damage was the cause of death. The doctor, Dr. Ernest Franco, is saying that he had vital signs while being transported to hospital, so he didn't die in the ring. They tried to resuscitate him for over an hour following the accident. I don't know if it played a role, but it seemed like they could have gotten medical attention out to him, 2 or 3 minutes earlier. They seemed to just let him. He was knocked out, and he was just. It looked like he was selling really well, but that wasn't the case.
Yeah, it's tough to say if the people could have gotten there sooner. Sure, they could have, but you don't know what's going on in that situation. I'm sure the first thought on T.J. Perkins' mind or Rey Mysterio's mind or who was the other person that was in the match?
Conan. Conan was outside.
Conan was ringside. Conan was there trying to revive him. Tigre Uno, Extreme Tiger. So I'm sure none of them initially thought like, oh, the guy's dead. I mean, I'm sure they thought he's knocked out or something. We need to, move, get him out of the way. Because they go right into another spot. Like, it's almost like as if they didn't miss a beat. Ray misses the 619, looks around confused, and they move off to the side and go to some dive spots and then go to the finish. I don't think you can place blame on anyone here. Not the doctors, not the EMTs, not Conan, not, Rey Mysterio. No one, not Paraguayo Jr. I mean, there's so many. It was just a freak thing, and it was terrible to see.
How do you think Ray knew not to hit him with the 619? Did Manic whisper something or yell at him? Because he went for the 619, and I don't know if he aborted it like right at the last moment, or he was just doing it just to get a cheap pop from the crowd to maybe they thought that it hit, or What are your thoughts on the missed 619?
You got something important going on back there?
Some deal going on?
Yeah.
I'll try to talk in between the rings. To me, it looked like Manic shook him. I'd have to watch it again to completely remember. But from what I remember, he kind of, he made contact or tried to figure out what was going on with Aguayo when he didn't move. And, he probably said something to Ray is my guess. Because Aguayo doesn't move, obviously, but Ray just kind of goes right over the top of him, doesn't even try to make it look like he hits him or, I think there was just a lot of confusion going on there. Ray played it safe. And, it's sad in a lot of ways because this was, I believe, Ray's second match since leaving the WWE. And I'm sure I can only imagine like the mindset that he's in after that. And it's terrible to see. But if there's any consolation, the family had him as a pallbearer at the funeral. Obviously they made a statement that said that they don't blame, any of the people that were in the ring there, and you can't. So,
yeah, just a really sad thing. And, I've watched the tape myself a few times and nothing really looks out of the ordinary. It just, I think he hit that bottom rope, and just really unfortunate. I think he was 34 years old or 35.
Yeah. He had been wrestling for since he was 15, so about 20 years in the business. He'd been all around the world. He was the top heel, so it'd basically be like, I don't know who you could liken it to. Right now, I guess the top heel is Seth Rollins. So if Seth Rollins mysteriously passed away, it would be, a huge blow to the WWE. And we'll see. It's not good for AAA. They had a rough week where they had, pay-per-view get pushed back a few days. They ran into multiple problems with that. And then, this clearly unfortunate incident with Paraguayo Jr.
Sure. I don't like to end on a sad note, but that's where we're going to end today. It was actually the first show where all we talked about was professional wrestling, but it's appropriate. This weekend is the biggest event of the year, WrestleMania 31. Tom will be there. I'll be there. Really looking forward to it. It's my first WrestleMania since 1994. I was a little kid, so first as an adult. So really looking forward to it, and we'll talk to you guys later. I think there was concerns that maybe if he got back in there and Frank Mir knocked him out, that it would somehow hurt his pro wrestling gimmick. What are your thoughts about, why ultimately he made the decision to re-sign with WWE?
I think there's a few factors. Obviously, age, I think, is the biggest one. Brock's, 38 years old. If he was 28 years old, I think it'd be a different story. Also, he's been out of the game for a few years, and when you're out of that competition mindset, it's a lot tougher to get back into it. I'm kind of going through the same thing right now, and Brock's had a longer layoff than I have. And I just know from my own personal experience, once you're not used to pushing like you're in camp all the time, when it's time to get back into that, it's very tough, and it's taxing on your body, and even more so mentally, especially if...
The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Remember this, when you're the greatest fighter in the world today, they got a name for you. They don't call you a great fighter, they call you Chael Son and beat me, if you can.
And after tonight, none of you in this ring will ever again.
You're talking to the Rolex wearing, diamond ring wearing, kid stealing, wheeling dealing, limousine riding, jet flying, son of a gun, and I'm having a hard time holding these alligators down. Woo!
I'm gonna drink a Coors Light. That's a Coors Light because Bud Light won't pay me nothing.
And I have my cold beer. You have your cold beer? If not, you are fucking jabroni.
Wash it down with 1 beer, 2 beers, 3 beers, a shot of whiskey.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Coming up on the Filthy FRB Show, we're going to talk about Bryan's time away at the NCAA Wrestling Championships this past weekend, as long as what went on at UFC Fight Night 62 down in Rio de Janeiro. Stay tuned, because we got a show coming at you now.
Look out! Damn! Triple H just took out the referee! What is he doing? What's this about? What's it for? What the hell is the meaning of this?
Tom, this weekend is the greatest martial arts event of the year, at least in my estimation, and it's WrestleMania 31. I'm excited. I'm going out to Santa Clara. I know you'll be there. What do you think so far, the build?
Well, I wasn't too excited, to be honest, up until yesterday when Brock Lesnar made his appearance on SportsCenter and made WrestleMania about 3,000 times more intriguing just by simply stating that his UFC and MMA career is over. He's now re-signed with the WWE, and it opens up about, a million possibilities as compared to just Roman Reigns walking out as a champion on Sunday night. Now Brock could win, Reigns could win, Rollins could cash in. We could see a Brock face turn, a Heyman turn. Maybe he goes with Reigns. There's so many options now coming out of yesterday's announcement on SportsCenter.
Sure, and before we get into the details of some of the things that could happen, just to talk a little bit about the decision that Brock made to re-sign with WWE. I was hopeful that he'd come back to the UFC just because I like seeing him fight. It's always exciting when it's a Brock Lesnar fight. Even when he loses, I don't think the guy's ever been in a boring fight. But I always thought that this made the most sense for him. There was some talk about concussions, which was backed up by guys that had been in the room with him, and they weren't allowed to punch him in the head during sparring, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of sparring. So I think there were some health concerns, and then I